Can you just tell us your name and what your connection is to Derek Evans in this photograph?
So my name is Vaughan Jenkins, and I was in that school from 1956 in Hereford. It was a big school, and I lived there until 1965.
So can you tell us what age you went there from? And I remember on the phone you were talking about how you went.
I was 3. I was 3 when I went there, and it was a boarding school. So I actually lived there from the age of 3 until 1965. And then I passed an exam and moved to a school in England. The school closed down in 1965, and I passed an entrance exam to move to another school when it closed down. The reason was because the headmistress was retiring. And so they had to sell the school, and it opened a year later. The local authority took it over, and it became a boys' school. There were about 30 children there, and it stayed like that as a boys' school until 1983. I'm very grateful to the school, and I've got a lot of good memories from my time there. Have you finished?
Yeah. So can you tell us about your first day at the school and when you arrived there?
Oh, that's a good question. My first day there, I was only 3. My father had bought a new car, an Austin. I don't remember the number, an Austin 4, an Austin 5. So my mother, my grandmother, my father and myself, the 4 of us drove all the way there. It was quite a windy drive. There were no motorways in those days. And when we arrived, we stopped at Brecon first of all on the way there for a break because it was such a long drive. And then when we got to the school, it looked enormous to me. My father said, "This is going to be your school," and I was shocked. There were a lot of children running round, and I couldn't quite believe it really. I met the headmistress, and they were chatting. She was chatting to my parents. I could see the children. They called me over, said, "Come on, come with us." So I followed them. My parents were shown all around the school, and I was just playing games with the children. I felt fine. And then when it was time for my parents to go, I was busy playing, and my parents had left. And then it hit me. But my father told me later that as they drove off, my mother was very, very upset. Oh, excuse me, it's bringing back a lot of memories. And, you know, they'd left like that. And so my mother was upset, and they drove just a short way, and they kept saying, "Is Vaughan going to be all right? Is Vaughan going to be all right?" So my father stopped the car and walked back and checked in with the headmistress and said, "You know, is Vaughan okay?" They took me into a room upstairs where they could look down on the children, and there I was playing around with the other children. So he got back to my mother and said, look, he's fine. I've seen him. He's playing with the other children. He's okay. But I'll never forget that day.
You okay?
Oh, the memories, you know, it was hard.
Do you want to stop for a bit? You want to stop, or are you okay?
No, I'm fine.
So tell us about some of the good memories about the gardening and all of the vegetables and the chickens and the geese and the...
Oh, we had a lot of jobs in the school, lots of good memories. We had the timetable and each session was set for the different things we'd be doing, gardening, cleaning, picking potatoes from the farm, helping to collect all the potatoes. They were all huge piles of potatoes. So we would do gardening, we had a greenhouse, we grew tomatoes, we'd have to feed them, pick out all the weeds. The girls, that was their job, to do the weeding, and the boys would do the digging. And so we gardened all the way through school, really. That was the biggest part of our time there, was gardening. It was a lot of work. Then actually in the classroom, we would do maths, English. They were the two priorities, really. The other one, different subjects, you know. But really, it was mostly gardening. It was such a big garden. People would clean, and people from Spain would come to help gardening as well. They would come over from Spain and they would work in the garden with us. And about 10 years ago, I went to see, to have a look around, and all the gardens are gone. The farmers' fields have gone. But my memories are of the gardens and the farm. And we used to play gardening, you know, the earth, the wet soil. We'd make it into weapons, and we'd throw them at each other. And then when somebody'd look, we'd stand still to not get caught. And we had some good fun.
Tell us about the teachers that were there. Tell us about the teacher who set the school up. She was hard of hearing, and the people that worked in the school, and the nice ones and the not very nice ones.
They were very strict. The headmistress was a very strict woman. We weren't allowed to sign. None of us could use BSL. We were taught orally. If we were caught signing, we'd have to write 100 lines. And there were only 4 teachers in the school. The headmistress, a maths teacher, a woman, Mrs. Lucas, a cook, just, you know, with a small kitchen. We had to travel to Hereford to get the ingredients for the cooking, and we used to do woodwork. There was actually no equipment in the school. So we used to go to a hearing school. I don't remember the name of the school, but we used to go there to do woodwork. And we'd meet in Ross-on-Wye and then travel back to school. That was how I learned woodwork, and I enjoyed that. I learned it a lot. They were basically the four or five teachers there, that's all.
So why did you go to, tell us why you went from Port Talbot, and I think there was you and some other boys went from Port Talbot to the school in Hereford, why to Woolhope? Why did you go all that way?
I believe we went to that school because the Glamorgan County Council advised my parents that it was the best school, that Hereford was better than Llandrindod-Wells. So my father accepted the advice of the council, and another boy, Christopher Charles, their parents were given the same advice. And there were 4 of us, and they said, oh, it would be better for you all to go, you can share the transport. And then another boy, John, came. He was from Port Talbot, and so we used to have lifts back and forth together. And I think Glamorgan County Council wanted us to go to Hereford rather than Llandrindod-Wells. I'm not sure why. The teachers were very good, but very strict. One teacher, a really big man, had thick hands and long fingers. Oh, we were terrified of him. When we would do school theatre, school plays, you can see it from the photo. He was one of the ugly sisters. Oh, and he was terrifying to look at. The other teacher was thin and quiet. It was like Laurel and Hardy.
So Vaughan, can you tell us about what you remember about Derek coming to take that photograph and what was going on in the photograph? What was happening?
I must have been about 6. And I remember having photographs taken. I was fighting with John in school, and the prefect caught us and took us to the headmistress. And that's one of the photographs. We're being told off, and both of us are looking up at the headmistress. And I remember that photograph because we'd been fighting and we had to see the headmistress. So I definitely remember that photo.
You both look so angelic in the photograph.
The photographer, Derek, caught a brilliant shot. It was just the perfect time because we were just looking up at the teacher and it was just a perfect shot.
You said on the phone that you thought that was a day maybe all the governors and parents were visiting the school that he came and took photographs. Does that ring a bell? No. I remember the photographer coming, but I don't remember if it was a special day. I remember the fireworks, and there are photographs of the fireworks. I'm holding a sparkler, and it was on the front of the newspaper. It was some sort of festival or an open day or something. I don't remember what the special event was. But it was in the afternoon that I was fighting with John, and something had happened and everyone was there for this festival. So when the teacher was trying to teach me maths, she was asking me what's 1 + 1 = 2. And I was trying to work it out and I kept getting it wrong. And I was getting so frustrated and I lost my temper. And you can see in that photo, my hand is up to my head. I'm like, oh, I don't understand. Then finally I understood it and then I smile. And that happened a lot. So you didn't feel self-conscious that the photographer was there? Did you forget he was there?
How did Derek?
We didn't know. He was taking photos. We didn't make eye contact with him. He was coming around and doing it quietly. He was walking around the desks. He was obviously looking for a good shot and just taking pictures as he saw a good shot.
That's the sign of a good photographer, isn't it?
So what about, tell us a bit about the hearing aid packs, because in the photographs it looks like you've got quite a fat tummy, doesn't it, where you've been eating too much porridge or something.
Yes, the hearing aids had a huge battery and it was really heavy. We used to wear it around our chest. And you'd put it on, it looked as if you had a fat tummy. You'd pull your jumper, you pull over it. It made you look enormous. But they were the old-fashioned hearing aids then in those days. They didn't help me at all because I'm profoundly deaf. And they were trying to teach me to speak. But I had very poor speech. And then I moved to another school and my speech did improve while I was there. The headmistress was hard of hearing. And so I don't know if her speech was that clear herself. It was hard to understand her. Maybe the other teachers with better speech, we could understand more clearly. But she was very good at writing things on the board and drawing, and she would explain to us. And every day she would tell us the news. She'd get the newspaper and tell us what she'd seen in the news. Oh, this is awful, this is what's happening. And we were very interested. We picked up a lot of news. And then when she'd finished looking at the newspaper, we'd look at the pictures.
Did you ever do any secret sign language, and what happened if you got caught signing?
We'd be behind our desks and we'd lift the desks up and sign to each other and secretly communicate through sign language. And then the teacher would walk around and she'd bang the desk on the top of our head and say, "Don't sign." Oh, and it used to hurt your head. You'd whack the desk lid on your head. And she'd throw chalk at us, sometimes it would hit you on the head, sometimes it would miss. And everyone would laugh at each other then and tease each other, and she'd throw the board rubber. We weren't allowed to sign. We weren't allowed to use BSL at all. It was all oral. And if they caught us signing, we'd have 100 lines. And we'd have to write, "I must not sign, I must not sign," 100 times. The headmistress was very strict. She wanted the children to speak. But the problem was, she was hard of hearing herself. And it was very difficult to have a conversation with her. She couldn't use the phone. Her partner, another teacher, would give her messages and say, "Look, we've had this phone call." She would have to take all the phone calls. She would relay the message to the headmistress because she couldn't use the phone herself. And we would just watch to see them talking in a phone. We didn't understand that at all.
But what about when you were sort of up in the dormitories and when you were away from the teachers? Was it all sign language?
Oh yes, in the dormitories, in the bedroom. We had two bedrooms, one for the boys and one for the girls. There were about 5 in each room, something like that, 5 or 6, or maybe 8, sharing the rooms, and we'd play about and sign and talk to each other non-stop. And then one boy would be by the door looking to warn us, and as soon as he'd say, there's a teacher coming, we'd all pretend, we'd get into bed quick and pretend to be asleep, and they'd shine the torch to check we were sleeping. It was good. We were free to sign and talk to each other. As soon as the teacher'd go, we'd all be back chatting, signing to each other. Sometimes we'd play about.
So just one last question really, is when you said you were really surprised when we got in touch with you, tell us about when we got in touch with you and how you felt. You said it's brought back quite a lot of memories. Just tell us a bit about how it feels to revisit those.
I had retired from work, I'd finished, and I had an email from someone in work saying that someone was looking for me. And I was really surprised. So I looked at the website and there were some questions on there. And I was looking for my name, Vaughan Jenkins, and it was me, but I wasn't sure. Was it a scam or some kind of fake person trying to contact me? So I was checking to see what the job was and to make sure it was the right person, not a scam. And then I contacted them by email and I had a response really quickly. And I said, you know, I am Vaughan, I am the right person you're looking for. And that's how we started to communicate with each other. And we were talking about the school and I said, well, I've got a lot of stories about my time there. And so now, today you're interviewing me and filming me about all these memories.
So tell us about, you know, we know John's here, but the audience doesn't know he's here at the minute, but tell us about keeping in touch with people and reconnecting with people in Portugal who are at the school with you.
My friend Christopher moved to a school in London. And then a year later, I moved to the same school. But our friend John stayed in Port Talbot. He went to a mainstream school. And Christopher and I stayed in touch because we were in the same school, but we didn't keep in touch with John because we were in completely different schools. Then as we got older, the three of us met again because we're all members of Bridgend Deaf Club. And so we're still in touch with each other. We play bowls, indoor games. And years ago, we used to play football and cricket. So we've kept in touch all these years. And you found me now.
So can you just tell us what your name is and where you live and what your connection is with the school?
My name's John Seage, and I went to school in Hereford.
Can you tell us about your first memories of the school, or do you remember your first day or a particularly strong memory of when you were first started? Tell us what age you went to school and how you came to be there.
I was born in 1954 and I went to the school when I was 4. I didn't have a clue what was going on. I didn't know anyone at all.
So what was your first day like? Can you remember?
I don't remember the first day. My friend had given me a lift. The neighbours had given us a lift in the car, dropped us off at the train station. It was a steam train, I think. And then we had to go on a coach. It was a long, long way to go, and eventually we got to the school. I saw the children, but I didn't know any of them. They were all new to me. I didn't know anyone at all.
Do you
and I felt panicky. I didn't understand what was happening.
Did you know that it was a boarding school, that you were going to be living there?
When I came home, I remember crying a lot, crying my eyes out that I didn't want to go back. And every month I was taken back.
Do you remember meeting Vaughan for the first time?
Yes, I remember meeting Vaughan. But then when I got home, I didn't realise that they lived in Port Albert, that we were actually all living in the same place.
So can you, John, can you tell us about that? Tell us about the fact that this is the original press cutting that the photograph was taken from. Tell us anything you remember about that day or the photograph.
I didn't know about the newspaper and I found it. I was really pleased to see it. A deaf friend of mine from Neath showed me the newspaper and gave it to me. They had kept it. It's the original one. It was about 3 years ago they gave it to me.
So had you never seen the
I'd never seen the photo before. I'd never seen the newspaper before until 3 years ago.
How did they come across it? How did they find it then? Did they happen to have a copy or?
It was a deaf friend. You know, I play bowls with a group and we were talking about the old schools that we'd gone to and we started talking about old photographs. And he said, I've got an old newspaper cutting. Would you like to keep it? And he gave it to me to keep.
So what do you remember anything about Derek coming and taking the photograph, or do you remember what was happening in the photograph?
I don't remember having the photographs taken. I don't remember the man, Derek Evans. I was very young, I don't remember any of it.
Okay. So tell us about some of the stories from the school. Vaughan was telling us about the school play where you had your L plates on.
I've got lots of memories from school, and at night time we'd go to bed and we'd all chat. They were a really great time. And I had this idea of using the pillows as like shields, and we were throwing things back and forth to each other. And I threw one and it smashed the window. Oh, it went right through the glass. Everyone was panicking. We all got into bed and pretended to be asleep. The teacher came. And then they realised it was mine that had gone out through the window. And they said, whose slipper is this? And everyone said, oh, we don't know whose slipper it is. Sometimes we'd jump on the beds and the teachers would hear the noise and they'd come in and call us out. They'd take us downstairs. It was a huge house. And we'd have to go and sleep in a room on our own, on a really hard bed. And then the other children would come and laugh at us being put in there for your punishment. I was a very naughty boy in school. And they would always laugh at me. I was a soldier in the school play. I had no idea what was happening. Vaughan Jenkins gave me this L plate to put on. I had no idea what it meant, but they put it round my neck and everyone laughed at me.
So tell us a bit about how you communicate then, because you didn't learn sign language, so and tell us a bit about, you said you found the hearing aids really difficult. Can you tell us a bit about that?
The old-fashioned hearing aids were really heavy and they didn't help at all. I'm profoundly deaf. I couldn't hear a thing. The teacher was teaching us orally, and they would cut up strips of paper and make us say p, p, and we'd have to blow out so that the piece of paper moved. And then she'd put her finger on her nose and on my nose to say and they kept on and on trying to do speech therapy with us, but it was no good at all. I can't speak at all. I've got no voice whatsoever.
So how did you communicate with the other children if you didn't know sign language?
Well, in school, we had desks and I'd talk to the child next to me and the teacher would throw the board rubber at me and say, don't sign, and then go back up the front. And that was it, really. Only secretly signing. Sometimes a teacher would call me out and smack me. I had lots of punishment. I'd have the cane on my hand about 5 times. Really hurt.
So what happened when the school closed then? Where did you go?
So once the school closed, I had no idea what was happening. I thought I'd just go home. I wasn't aware of what was going on. So I came home to Port Talbot and they showed me a school close to home. But I was the only deaf child there. Everyone else was hearing. So it was really difficult. And then they moved me to another school, a bigger school. And they found a unit for me there where the teachers would try and teach me. I left school when I was 17 and looked for a job. The social worker came and asked if I'd like to work with other deaf people. And I was so shocked when I got there. My old school friend, Christopher Charles, was there. And he was able to help me. He taught me to be an electrician. And of course, we communicated really well. Then Christopher asked me if I wanted to go to Bridgend Deaf Club. So I said, oh yeah, that'd be good. I asked my parents and they said no, they didn't want me to go. But my other friend said, oh, come on, let's go. So we went to Bridgend Deaf Club. I decided to ignore my parents and I would go. So we got to the old Bridgend Deaf Club. It was in town then. And there was Vaughan Jenkins and other people I knew, but they were all fluent BSL users. And I really struggled to understand them. So they taught me sign language and think my life is much better now.
So how did you feel when you got when Vaughan got in touch with you and said about coming along today and talking about your old school days?
Well, talking about school, I suppose they were good times, but really now I think, you know, the 3 of us here in Port Talbot is better now I'm older. I played darts, bowls. I used to play football, cricket. I broke my hand playing cricket years ago. Oh, and I was in A&E for 5 hours waiting to get my thumb sorted one time when I broke my thumb playing cricket. Because the gloves that you wear are quite hard. But they're all left-handed and I was right-handed. I tried to put it on my left hand and of course it didn't work and the ball cracked my bone. So this is me, Vaughan, and this is me, John. So I remember this well. John and I had been fighting, we were very naughty, and the prefect had dragged us to the teacher and we're both looking up at her while she's telling us off. I think it was fighting over sweets. I can't remember. I know I was naughty in school, but I can't remember what it was over.